Representative Raul Labrador is a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in Idaho's 1st Congressional District. He is currently finishing a second term in the Idaho State Legislature, where in just 4 years he has gained a reputation amongst his colleagues as a soft-spoken, articulate, well-respected member of the House.
I like Raul because he is a man of integrity, and he's a man that I know personally. I know how he stands on the issues, and he has a voting record in the House of Representatives that tell us who he is and how he will react and how he acts here and how he will act when he gets to Congress.
And he is one of 8 this year of the House members with a 100% voting record on the conservative scorecard.
In a recent interview with Representative Labrador, we spoke candidly about his race, his position on various issues, including immigration, and his general outlook. Representative Labrador, this is your first time running for Congress. You've got an opponent in the primary. What are your plans?
So I have a lot of support from the people on the ground who understand what's happening in Idaho, the needs that Idaho has. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with all these people. I was very pleased yesterday when Mr. Chadwick endorsed me. He said that Raul Labrador is in the mold of Ronald Reagan, and that's why I want to support him and endorse him. And I think one person can make a difference, and that's why I'm running for this race.
I had the privilege of serving under Reagan, and I couldn't agree more. There's a question as to where you stand on immigration.
That's a great question. I am actually an immigration attorney, and I represent people not just of Mexican descent, but I represent Canadians, people from all over the world. I believe 3 simple things. Number 1, we need to enforce the laws that are already in the books. The laws already say that if you're here in the country illegally, you shouldn't be here and you should be kicked out. The laws already say that if you hire an illegal alien, that you should be penalized as an employer. I am 100% behind that, and I think we need to make sure that we enforce the laws. Number 2, we need to give our law enforcement agents more tools for them to fight against this scourge of illegal immigration. And what we need to make sure is that we allow them, give them the capabilities and the abilities to go after these people who are doing us harm. Because there's a lot of people who are coming here illegally just to do a job or just to work. But there's a lot of people who are coming here to do us harm. And we need to make sure that we have these men and women who are fighting at the front lines. We need to give them the tools and abilities that they need. Number 3, we need to have a guest worker system that actually works. We need to reform the way those things are done so we can actually have people come in here legally and do the things the right way.
Let's talk for a minute about the Constitution.
The first thing you need when you talk to somebody about the Constitution, you need to ask that politician, have you actually read the Constitution? I have read it, and I haven't read it just one time. I've read it several times. And I look at it as the founding document, the document that tells me what the federal government can do and only the things that the federal government can do. We have all these people who raise their right hand, but they're raising their right hand and they're making a pledge to uphold the Constitution, and they haven't even read it, and they don't even understand it.
The response that I get when I speak to many of your colleagues who have come out openly endorsing you, which is so unusual during a primary.
Raul is supported by 35 of the Idaho legislators, which is very unusual, very remarkable. They have served with him. They know him well. But usually legislators stay out of primary races. They don't take sides. They don't line up against one opponent or the other. He's endorsed by 35, which I think speaks very highly of the respect that he has. One of the pieces of legislation I want to talk about that he's involved in was the Idaho Health Freedom Act. That was a very important piece of legislation, and it will be as we look at the history of this nation. And Raul was one of the major sponsors on that piece of legislation. He supported it, he worked on it, and he brought it to fruition.
Representative Phil Hart wrote, "In the 4 years that Raul and I have served together in the Idaho legislature, I have witnessed many times Raul standing up to the establishment and the special interests, even when he knows he'll pay a price for doing so. I am confident that Raul will do the same representing Idaho in Congress." I've talked to a number of people who pretty much say the same thing, to that you don't always just go along with the crowd.
I can recall one piece of legislation that Raul stood up and debated against simply because he thought it may violate the federal Constitution. So, you know, it's not that he just rubber stamps what comes down the road, but also, you know, he takes the time to actually read it and look at it and weigh whether or not it's a good idea.
You know, I told my wife 4 years ago when I first ran for the legislature that I would work really hard to win the primary. I would work really hard to win the general election. The one thing I will never do is go away from my principles.
In 2008, I was selected to be a delegate to the Idaho State Convention for Republicans, and it was my first political act of my life, other than voting. And near the end of the convention, there was a lot of commotion going on, and I perceived a great deal of fear amongst the delegates around me. And I began hearing anxious whispers and wondered what was going on. And being very new to this whole process, I asked questions and found out that there had been, whether real or implied, threats to the delegates that they needed to vote for a particular way for a certain candidate or face some political recrimination. And then through the commotion on the floor, I saw this man, tall, dark-haired man, walked up to the microphone and just very calm and very quiet proposed that we do a secret ballot for this particular vote in order to ensure fairness to the delegates. The man at the microphone's name was Raul Labrador. I had not heard of him before, nor had I met the man, but I was really impressed with his dignity and his integrity and his clarity of purpose as he stated what needed to be done in order to have a fair convention.
There have been times when you've even criticized the Republican Party if you think they need it. In Congress, will that same principle hold true?
I will never tote anybody's line, but the principles of the Constitution and the principles that come from my faith and my upbringing. Anybody who has a good idea that is constitutionally based and will be for the betterment of Idahoans and of Americans, I will work with them and I will stand by them. And whenever my party does something wrong, I will be the first one to stand up and criticize them for that, because I'm not there just to make people happy. If I wanted to make people happy, I think I would get in a different line of work.
The stimulus bill, the health care bill, I mean, people don't even have a chance to read them. Mm-hmm. How are you going to handle all that?
We actually need to get back to the basics where we have small bills that talk about specific subjects. As you know, in the Idaho House of Representatives, we can only vote on single issue legislation. It is high time that in Congress we only vote for single issue legislation. That's one of the main things that I want to reform when I go to Washington, D.C. That you don't have a stimulus bill that is tied up with a military bill, and then you want to vote for military spending, but you don't want to vote for the stimulus, and you're forced to vote for the bill because you don't want to look like you're anti-American. And I will vote no on all those bills unless we start to separate them.
Well, his attitude is that he supports the taxpayers. He represents the taxpayers, the average person, and he knows that everyone is struggling and cannot afford additional taxes. And so he would stand on the House floor and remind everyone that we could not vote for an increase in taxes because people simply couldn't afford it. They're having a hard enough time just feeding their families.
If you had just one thing that you would say to people to get them involved, what would it be?
Take action when you feel that your congressmen or your legislators are letting you down.
You're going to try to keep
I'm
in
going to
communication.
try to communicate with them. You know, one of the things that I have seen is you have phone conferences where you can invite constituents to actually be on the phone conference. Obviously, I'll be traveling to the state quite a few times and meeting with constituents within the state, going to all the different groups. But it's just really important that the American people actually let us know what they're thinking.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.